Yeah, Jonathan, go.
Thank you. Amazing talk. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the conflicting genealogies between Matthew and Luke. I've heard a few different theories, but I'm curious to hear your take.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they are quite different. One way of doing that is to say that that one goes through Mary, one goes through Joseph. There's no knockdown argument in either of these for which one, but it's also possible to have both be basically correct, but kind of like, because genealogies can skip, right? They don't always include everybody. If Uncle Henry was a horse thief, he can be kind of excluded from the genealogy, right? And so there's a certain malleableness in genealogies that shows up. So I don't have here's the resolution to that. I just acknowledge that they're there. They're different. Both are granted kind of canonical status, and so presumably have some legitimacy. But like I said, it seems like the Luke one is the one that at least, as it were, Joseph's sons are carrying around with them. So, yeah. Another element that you get in these very early traditions is that you have so you remember Mary is cousins to Elizabeth, who's in this priestly family, right? And so there's this kind of thought that the priestly and the Davidic come together there in Christ, and that ends up being important for some early Christian thinkers, that you kind of have both in there. So, yeah. I don't know if that's satisfactory anyway, but yeah, I don't have a knockdown.
Yeah, no, I guess it's probably something we can't know for sure. But
yeah.
I mean, like, I've heard the one potentially being genealogy from Mary. Another theory I've heard is that it might account for the I think there's a practice like if a man and a woman married but they didn't have children, the woman would marry the brother.
Yeah, levirate marriage. Yeah.
So you could measure the genealogies based on the first marriage or the marriage through which kids came.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's one theory that some church fathers subscribe to. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, again, possible, but like we don't have the information. We can, come up with theories that are plausible, and that's one of them. But yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your lecture. You were talking about how there were known relatives of Jesus in the first 3 centuries, and it got me thinking if you're aware of any tradition of known relatives beyond that.
No. So the last one that we have is this Conon. It's in English transliteration, Conon. So not Conan like the barbarian, but Conon. And so probably what happens is that just the people who are doing the chronicling increasingly are not just Gentile, but we're kind of Gentile and removed from any remnants of kind of the Hebrew, Aramaic speaking Jesus movement there in the land. And because of that, they're just dropped from history as far as record. So that Conon, it's likely that there's a kind of a cave that seems to be some kind of a martyrium, right? So remembering a martyr, and we have a kind of a martyr report of him from the kind of I think it's late 3rd, maybe early 4th when it's finally written, century. And so, like I said, he dies in the 290s during the Decian persecutions. But like the rest of the family, so he's known to be from Nazareth, but has gone to work, and he's a manual laborer, so he's not a person of means, according, to standards of the world, but is remembered back there after he's killed. So, yeah.
On a follow-up to that, does that correspond with kind of the disappearance of Jewish Christians? Because didn't the Jewish church kind of peter out or disappear? When did that happen?
Yeah, so basically what happens is that after the conversion of Constantine, you begin to get more kind of Christian building projects and all of that in the land. And how can I put it? It seems like the Jesus movement, the kind of Jewish Christian community that was trying to really reach the Jewish people, it survived this intense opposition of the rabbinic movement as long as that was the only thing it was resisting. But it seems to have kind of dissipated or gone underground or something. I don't know. It kind of disappears at the point at which you get, as it were, like imperial funded kind of Christian presence. And then you have when they're caught between, like the Jews hate them because they follow Jesus and the Gentile Christians suspect them because they're still Jews, right? That became the spot where they at least disappear from recorded history.
But I mean, what I'm asking though is does whatever years that was, what is that compared to Conan? Where is Conan?
So Conan, he's martyred in 290s, and this is like mid 300s where this starts happening.
He's before.
He's before that.
So following the family of Jesus kind of disappears, but there's still a Jewish church.
There's still some Jewish church, yeah. But it's not until you get to, there was a Council of Elvira in Spain that was the first, it was like 600s or something like that, was the first time that there was a kind of a requirement that Jewish converts renounce being Jews, which I think is a problem. So, I don't think that Greeks that convert should renounce being Greeks, and I don't think that Italians or Spaniards or anybody else, and I don't think that Jews should renounce being Jews when they come to Jesus. So, yeah. But anyhow.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. The Council of Elvira, I believe, is the first time in which you have a kind of a prescription for conversion of Jews that involves renouncing, being a Jew and any life with Torah and so forth. So you think about it this way: what we've been reading, these little testimonials, and from the rabbinic movement trying to legislate isolation, right? So you can't buy vegetables from a Jesus-following Jew, somebody who believes in Jesus. We're going to remove the Decalogue from, if you talk with a Jesus follower and you seem to enjoy it, you're going to get informed on as being a Christian, and then you have to deal with the authority. All that is kind of trying to enforce a social isolation so that they can't interact. Unfortunately, what happens is you get a similar sort of thing coming from the Christian side at a certain point, where they're like, so if you're going to be a part of us, you can't be a part of that thing anymore, right? And that seems to be kind of, as it were, between the rock and the hard spot. It's something that the movement doesn't survive, it seems. So, yeah. Yeah, Nikos wants it.
Thank you. So yes, it's this reminds me of the so-called debate about the supersession theology, and the opposite is like the covenant, or I don't remember. Like
couldn't hear that.
in Protestant debate, like supersession, and the opposite, I don't remember how it is called. Covenant,
Oh,
right?
covenant theology?
I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah.
So yes, we can say that in a sense maybe that was a result of the of Christianity becoming a state religion, and one can say maybe without so much hesitation that the first time that I mean, in the Middle Ages, you had like this so-called disputations between rabbis and Christians, and the Inquisition also, and the conversos in Spain. That some were, some people were suspecting them of being crypto-Jews and something like that. Right. So one can say that the first time that this trend towards Jews reversed only after the Reformation, and not either with Luther, because I think
No, he was very innocent.
Yeah. So it's mostly maybe the Calvinist Reformed theology that it tried, or I don't know.
No,
because
it's way more recent than that. Even it's really in the last 100 years or so that
just 100 years.
Yeah, you have people really starting to rethink that,
because
and a lot of it's post-Holocaust. So
because I think that Oliver Cromwell, for example, in England, and also in like Erasmus did this thing of back to the source for ancient Greek, but many people like Reuchlin, I think, started to study the Hebrew language in order to
I mean, going all the way back, or both Origen and Jerome go and learn Hebrew from rabbis and so forth. But that doesn't ever issue in a kind of a rethinking of this move towards kind of supersessionism. That goes back as far as like Justin Martyr, right? And you kind of get this flip. Like, so here's the thing. So Paul, think of, for instance, Romans 4. He's absolutely insistent that you don't take somebody who a Gentile that converts to Christ and make him be circumcised, because then the end result of mission is that there would no longer be anything but, like successful world mission, there would only be one nation and they would all be Israel, right? Because that's what a proselyte makes a Jew, right? Makes a Gentile into a Jew. And so he insists that no, if you're a Gentile, you remain a Gentile now following Jesus as Christ as Messiah, right? Why? Because the Creator God is God of all nations, okay? Now, what never crossed his mind was the thought that appears then about 100 years later, and you get first in Justin Martyr, right? Which is this idea that a Jew who turns to Christ would need to renounce being a Jew, right? Like that you're either or, right? Now that's not part of like an enforced conversion ritual or anything like that, but it's first kind of a point pressed there that this is kind of an either or thing, and I think Paul would have been just as incensed at that idea, and for the very same reason. Because now God's not God of all nations, right? There's at least one that has to be excluded, and that's Israel, right? And so if for somebody to follow Jesus, the Jew has to cease being a Jew, then there's at least this one nation that God is not God of anymore. He's, as it were, defected, right?
So it's like against, like, Sorry, to add something more. I know this is like politicized, very much politicized these days, at least. But we could say like the Romans 12, I think, chapter 12, is actually against supersessionism because practically means that the role of the not of the state of Israel, but of the people of Israel as an ethnic group. And from then, maybe one can say about the state that was not finished with the establishment of the church. That's one matter of discussion. And something else I would like to add, like maybe there is kind of a clear distinction. So it's theological or historical, I'm not sure. But like, for example, if you go to the United Kingdom or Ireland, they say like the Catholics, they have, and if you follow football also, Celtic fans in Edinburgh, in Scotland, Glasgow, they have Palestine flags, and the Protestant people, they have Israeli flags.
Yeah.
So maybe that shows something. I don't know.
Yeah. So, if you guys want, sometime we can do Romans 9 through 11 in this path, this, the way I understand it is something like this. What Paul's doing in there is he sees that God has a certain strategy in choosing people that's really important to the Lord. And that is that he isn't going to just kind of zap down and take one person back to himself. Instead, he's going to work through one person and through one people group to reach another. It's as it were the knights move on the chessboard, right? And so God, he works through Israel in order to bring salvation to the world, right? And part of what that means is for me to receive Christ, I have to receive a Jew, right? And I'm likely going to receive that also from a person that's quite different, like maybe from a different nation or something also. So I have to receive another person, somebody different from me in order to reconnect to God, okay? Now that is so important to the Lord, the fact that he's going to work in such a way that he doesn't just, as it were, reconnect humanity to himself vertically, but he also kind of mends the fractures of humanity with each other as he does it. Right? That strategy is so important to him. What you get to at the end in chapter 11 is that Israel herself won't be the exception. That eventually, what's happened is, and this is the mystery, he says, there's this hardening that's come on Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles enters in, and thus, and it's hutos, it's adverb, right? It's in this way, right? All Israel shall be saved. In other words, there's going to be some kind of reception back through the Gentiles, and so there's not, as it were, any rejection of Israel, but there is a sense that it's important to the Lord that, as it were, they receive it through another in the same way that we've had to receive it through another. So there's something pretty deep in there about how the Lord works. So, yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Can I?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture. It was super interesting. I think that there is like a parallel that can be drawn from like the Jewish society to the I'd say like the early Byzantine society, where like 4th century, where you have Constantine, who becomes a Christian late in his life, and then you have Theodosius. But before Theodosius comes Julian, who is like a renegade, an upstart, right? And actually, Julian is considered to be, like the last resurgence of the pagan Greeks and the pagan world. And Julian actually considers Christians not to be Greeks. He considers them like being like against
barbarian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like Semitic influence.
Yeah. And all these developments that you analyze so elegantly in the Jewish world remind me of what happened here in Greece, where you had for example, there were like Celsus or Porphyrios, who were like I would say I wouldn't call them exactly philosophers, because they were very much bound to the emperor and all that, to the Roman emperors, the pagan emperors. And actually one of them said that I had heard from a Jewish person that actually Jesus was the son of a Roman soldier.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting, because these people actually there is a neo-pagan movement here in Greece. There was actually in early 2000s, I think. Like 2 decades ago. And because they would actually call Christians, non-Greek, and actually, the people in second century or third century, they would say, I got this argument against Jesus from a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
And it's actually in the Talmud as well. But I really didn't know about how Parthenos connects to. This was
yeah.
magnificent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I wanted to ask about the sources and Eusebius specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the cornerstone of Christian history, pretty much, historiography rather. What would you say in terms of these, accounts, especially from the first century, some of which seem quite anecdotal, maybe from oral traditions, maybe even some written traditions, which not be that trustworthy. How trustworthy do you think Eusebius is on these accounts? Not everything, because we can assume he's trustworthy on especially political issues, maybe.
Yeah.
Various other historical accounts, but these kind of anecdotal issues.
Well, so he quotes Julius Africanus and Hegesippus. So he has written sources that he's working out of that get much closer to the events. And so, Hegesippus is second century. He spans a good portion of it, and he's from Palestine. He's in that region, so there's good reason to think that he would, have familiarity with people who know. So I think it's, I don't think there's a global answer to historicity and things like this. I think you have to kind of examine each of the cases and say, well, does it match or not, and so forth. But in these bits that we're working with, there's nothing kind of glaringly, apart from so Domitian's not in the land, it's going to be a representative or something like that. But you can talk about being called before Domitian and it's one of his henchmen, that's, and so yeah, I think both Africanus and Hegesippus are fairly credible sources for it. So, so I don't know if that answers your question.
That's what he mainly draws from with these accounts. Okay.
Yeah, those are his sources, and he cites them. So, and then it's interesting because then Epiphanius, he also knows some of these things, and it's kind of less clear sometimes where he got it from. So, but yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the architectural nicknames.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm very interested in this because it's in my field of research.
Okay.
But it's interesting how it expands then in the later centuries in Christian thinkers. With Eusebius, for example, talking about the Church of St. Peter, I believe, where he says there are 12 columns and they represent the apostles.
Ah, yes. Okay.
And then there are some medieval theologians in the West, like Honorius of Autun, and he says things like the windows are the doctors of the church because they illuminate the church.
Yeah, that's great. It definitely gets built on and expanded. I think part of what we want to remember that's important is that the point of the architectural nicknames being attached to human beings, right, is that it's the community built around Christ. It's the people themselves that are the place where God's working. And then when you have church buildings structured, the symbolism of that architecture, as it were, is symbolic of the significance of the people, right? Not the other way around. Like, it's easy for us to imagine that this place is so important, and it's about the place, but it's the people, right? It's the people.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's great. Thank you. That's
This might be a dumb question, but like when you're saying that guy was saying you can't be a Jew anymore, like practically, what does that mean? Like, like you can't not be ethnically a Jew. Like you can't change his ethnicity. But if it's like religiously, it's like, yeah, you can't deny Jesus. So like, I mean, that's okay, right? I mean,
so usually what that involved was saying that, you shall not be kosher in what you eat, start eating pork, this sort of thing, stop keeping Sabbath, et cetera, right? There were distinctive practices that are part of, so Jewish identity was never understood to be primarily about blood, right? And so I'll just tell you my understanding. What's resolved in the earliest church, what you see in Acts and Paul and so forth, is something like this: that the Torah. So this is Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15, right? They write to the Gentiles and they say, it seems good to the Holy Spirit and to us to put no greater burden on you than this, to refrain from things strangled and from blood, contamination, things touched by idolatry, things, sexual immorality, things strangled in blood. Now, what's interesting there is if you see what those are specific commands from what's called the Holiness Code in Leviticus 17 through 19. But they're the specific places where, as they're going through, Leviticus says this is for you and for the sojourner, the foreigner living among you. Okay? In other words, here's the decision being made, if I just break it down. It's this. It's that the Torah, so meaning the old, the Moses legislation, right? It addresses different people. Okay? Actually, there's no human being to whom every law is applicable, right? There's some for women, some for men, some for priests, et cetera, right? But there's just a very few that are for Gentiles living in a close relation to Israel. And those are the ones that are pulled out in Acts 15. And so basically what the early church's decision is that only the parts of Torah addressed to Gentiles will be something that we ask Gentiles to keep, right? What never crosses anybody's mind is to say, and you Jews should stop, keeping the laws that God gave you, right? And so, James obviously does, and the church in Jerusalem does this. And when Paul comes in, so in Acts, he's, bringing this contribution from Gentile churches, and James says, they've heard that you tell people not to get circumcised, and all of that. He said, so, and they're upset. So take that money, and here's 4 people with a Nazirite vow. Go pay for their sacrifice so they can complete their purification and end their vow. And then everybody will know that you're for the law, right? So, and he does it. He does it. So, I mean, there's just not, in the early church, there's not any kind of wholesale, like we're against Torah. There's just this important differentiation that Torah has a specific thing to say for those who are Jewish, but it says something much smaller and less, right, as far as any kind of behavioral guidance, right, for Gentiles. And Gentiles should follow the part that addresses them, and Jews should, follow the part that addresses them, and both should take what's said and go down to the heart underneath it, because it's actually the transformation of heart that in Gentile and Jewish ways needs to be worked out. So that's how I understand what's going on in these early times. We can go deeper into that if you want at some point, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
To clarify,
Yeah, please.
so this isn't a question. I'm trying to clarify his question with what you just said. So,
Yeah, help me. I may have missed it.
because he asked what did they mean by saying, like, if you're, the church has become vastly non-Jewish by this point. And they're saying, and at this certain point in history, the authorities in the church say to the Jews, the Jewish Christians, if you're going to be a Christian, you need to be like just a Christian, not a Jew.
Yeah.
And I think he was asking, like, how could they do that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, maybe I didn't say that clearly enough.
Like, what does it mean to be a Jew? And like how, like what was the church asking them to give up or to stop?
I think the primary thing is circumcising their children, right? Being distinct in what they eat, keeping Sabbath. I think those are the, as it were, the most kind of visible, recognizable things, and those are what they wanted them to stop. So
we see a flip in Acts. Believers are mostly Jewish, and you have Paul going out and converting all the Gentiles,
and making room for them,
making room for them, and he has to go to the Jerusalem church and say, "What do we do with all these Gentiles?"
Yeah.
But then years later, the church is kind of flipped, where it's more Gentile than it is Jew, and they say, "Don't be Jew anymore."
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think it was, I think it was a mistake, and I think there needed to be, as it were, the one who advocated, as Paul did for the Gentiles, that needed to happen. That's so. Anyhow, Othan. Yeah.
So, from a historical point of view, how did Christian emperors treat Jews differently from, let's say, pagans? Because to my understanding, paganism was treated very harshly, right? Like,
that's
almost
true.
got eliminated from Europe.
Yeah.
But then Jews, were they seen as a different religion from which Christianity originated? So they kind of have a special spot in how they're being treated politically, or what was the perception there?
Yeah, so there were two things that went on there. One, yes, there was a toleration of Jews and Jewish communities that was not there for pagans. So that is true. However, it was also part of and this goes back to Augustine, this sense that this kind of subjugated status of Jews was a sign of their guilt and rejection of the Lord. And so the ongoing presence of Jews that are there but don't have full rights and all of that subjugation, it's like they needed them to be there, but also to not be, equal, right? Because it had this symbolic role of kind of reminding. And so that it changed a lot from time to time. But here's the thing. In general, what you see is that it was, there would be pogroms from time to time, but they would be local. They were not state, sponsored and things like that. But where it gets to be the worst is much later with the creation of nation states. And at the point at which you get rid of that distinction altogether, and the Jews now become citizens also, that's where you get the worst pogroms. And that's what, Herzl, Theodor Herzl, and so forth start to see something going on here. And part of what that is, it's something like this. It's like throughout the ages, there was always this sense that it's like, well, I may have it bad, but there's at least these ones I know I'm better than, right? And when I can't say, at least I could beat up on these and they have no rights, that's where the anti-Semitism, where the anti-Judaism kind of really, really flared up its worst. And so anyhow, it varied a lot throughout the ages, but that was the general sense. They had a certain toleration, but they were tolerated to remain subjugated as a sign of their guilt. And so that, yeah.
So it's strange and tragic irony that like the Jewish emancipation started with the liberalism and nationalism with the nation states, like Napoleon in France and in Germany, and like Jews became equal rights citizens. But then, like especially in Germany, it was like a schizophrenic situation. Like people there, like Germans asked the Jews to be Germans, and then not all of Germans, but then the Germans or the state attacked them for trying to be Germans.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this is absolutely like weird, and crazy.
Okay, we are after 10. Anybody have a question or a thought or something that you've been kind of dying to get out? So.
Well, I want to ask the last question.
Okay, yes, go Kostas.
I'm always surprised why Paul never talks about Virgin Mary.
Yeah. Well, there's one place he possibly does, because he refers to Christ as one born of woman, born under law. Yeah, so it's possible that you have this kind of reference to the virgin birth through that. But what you have, I'll say a little bit more here. So there's virgin birth, that's one piece. The other thing that you get is of the seed of David, right? So that side is important to him. But it's interesting, going all the way back, there's this kind of tendency to kind of downplay, like being a brother of the Lord, things like this, right? Even in these places, it's like the brother according to the flesh, right? So this tendency to try to downplay that status. But anyhow, yeah, your question was more simple, and I'll just say I think you have this one reference, perhaps, but but that's all that you get from Paul. Yeah. Good question. Good question. All right.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hey, thank you guys.